The mining laser cut through Europa's ice like a knife through butter. Dr. Sarah Chen watched the readouts from the orbital platform, her coffee growing cold in the zero-gravity mug floating beside her workstation. After 6 months of routine, ice harvesting, nothing surprised her anymore, until the laser stopped working. "Control, we have a problem down here," came the voice of Jake Morrison, the lead mining operator on the surface. Static crackled through the comm, which was odd. Europa had perfect communication conditions today. "What's your status, Jake?" Sarah asked, leaning closer to her microphone. "The laser just died. Not malfunction, not power failure. It hit something and just stopped. Sarah, you need to see this." The video feed flickered to life, showing Jake's helmet camera view. Where the mining laser had been cutting, there was no longer ice. Instead, a smooth, dark surface reflected the mining rig's floodlights. The material looked like metal, but not any metal Sarah had ever seen. It seemed to absorb light at the edges while reflecting it in the center, creating an impossible optical illusion. "Jake, step back from the surface, now." "Sarah, I'm reading massive energy signatures down here. This thing, whatever it is, it's huge. The ground-penetrating radar shows it extends down at least 2 kilometers. But that's not the strangest part." Sarah's hands trembled as she adjusted the controls, trying to get a better view. "What's the strangest part?" "It's not buried in the ice, Sarah. The ice was built around it. This thing has been here longer than Europa's oceans." As Jake's camera panned across the exposed surface, geometric patterns became visible. Not random scratches or natural formations, but deliberate designs, symbols, writing. And in the center of it all, something that made Sarah's blood run cold. A window. And through that window, a faint blue light was beginning to glow. "Jake, get out of there now." But the transmission had already gone dead. Chapter 1. Awakening Giants. 3 weeks later, the conference room at the United Earth Space Command buzzed with nervous energy. Holographic displays showed data streams from 12 different planets and moons where similar discoveries had been made. Admiral James Crawford stood at the head of the table, his weathered face grim as he addressed the assembled team. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are no longer alone, and we may never have been alone." Dr. Sarah Chen sat between Dr. Marcus Webb, the team's xenoarchaeologist, and Captain Elena Vasquez, a decorated military pilot who'd been pulled from active duty for this assignment. Sarah's hand still shook slightly when she thought about Jake Morrison. They'd found his body 3 days ago, perfectly preserved but with no signs of trauma. He'd simply stopped living. "The objects we've discovered," Admiral Crawford continued, "are not natural formations, they are vessels. Specifically, they appear to be warships of incredible size and sophistication." The holographic display shifted, showing a 3-dimensional reconstruction of the Europa discovery. The object extended deep into the moon's core, roughly spherical but covered in geometric protrusions and weapon-like structures. It was easily the size of Manhattan. "How many?" Captain Vasquez asked, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were seeing. "So far we've confirmed 47, Dr. Webb replied, consulting his tablet. "But our deep space telescopes are detecting similar signatures throughout the galaxy. We estimate there could be thousands, maybe tens of thousands." Sarah cleared her throat. "Admiral, there's something else. The energy signatures we're detecting aren't random. They're synchronized. All 47 ships are powering up on the same schedule." Admiral Crawford nodded grimly. "Which brings us to why you're all here. Dr. Chen, your expertise in quantum archaeology makes you uniquely qualified to understand these vessels. Dr. Webb, your work with ancient civilizations gives us context. Captain Vasquez, if these things wake up hostile, we need someone who understands combat." "And if they wake up friendly?" Sarah asked. The Admiral's expression darkened. "Then we need to understand why they were sleeping in the first place." A new voice cut through the room, a young technician bursting through the security doors. "Admiral, we have a problem. The Europa site, something's happening." The main display flickered to life, showing a live feed from Europa's surface. Where once there had been ice and mining equipment, now there was a massive crater, And rising from that crater, breaking free from millions of years of frozen slumber, was something that defied comprehension. The ship was awakening. Its hull gleamed with an inner light, and as it rose, chunks of ice the size of buildings fell away like shed skin. The geometric patterns Sarah had seen on the surface were revealed to be massive weapon systems, sensor arrays, and propulsion units. The vessel was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. "My God," whispered Dr. Webb. "It's magnificent." As they watched in stunned silence, similar feeds began coming in from other sites across the solar system. Mars, Titan, the asteroid belt, even Earth's moon. Everywhere humanity had found these buried giants, they were waking up, and they were all turning their sensors toward Earth. "Admiral," Captain Vasquez said quietly, "what's our defensive capability against something like that?" "Admiral," Crawford's jaw tightened. "Against one of them? Maybe we could mount a defense against all of them?" He paused, watching as the Europa ship finished its emergence and hung in space like a dark star. "We'd better hope they're friendly." But even as he said it, they all knew the same terrible truth. You don't bury warships unless you're hiding from something, and whatever these ships had been hiding from was still out there. Waiting. Chapter. Our first contact, the message arrived exactly 72 hours after the first ship awakened, not through radio waves or quantum entanglement, but directly into the minds of every human being on Earth simultaneously. Sarah was in her lab, analyzing fragments of the strange metal from Europa, when the voice filled her consciousness. It wasn't quite a voice, more like the memory of a voice, speaking in concepts rather than words. "Children of Earth, we greet you in the name of the fallen coalition. Your awakening of our guardians has been premature. Around the world, every human stopped what they were doing. Traffic halted. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even newborn babies stopped crying as the message continued. We are the last remnant of those who came before. We have slept for 50 million of your years, waiting for the danger to pass. It has not passed." Sarah felt Dr. Webb grab her arm as they both struggled to process what they were experiencing. This wasn't just communication. It was a download of information directly into their minds. Images flashed through her consciousness. Vast space battles between ships that dwarfed entire planets, civilizations reduced to ash, worlds cracked, open like eggs. The Devourers are returning. They consume life, consume thought, consume the very fabric of reality itself. We hid our guardians throughout the galaxy, buried them where young races might find them, hoping against hope that someday there would be allies to stand with us. Captain Vasquez burst into the lab, her face pale but determined. "Are you getting this?" she gasped. Sarah nodded, unable to speak as more images flooded her mind. The beings who had built these ships weren't human, but they weren't entirely alien either. They were familiar somehow, as if humanity shared some distant genetic memory with them. "You are our inheritors, children of Earth. The Devourers have sensed our awakening. They come now across the void between galaxies. We have perhaps one of your years before they arrive." "1 year, Sarah," whispered, finally finding her voice. "The Guardians will teach you, they will share their knowledge, their weapons, their purpose. But the choice is yours. You may flee to the dark spaces between stars as we did, or you may stand and fight for all life in this galaxy." The presence in their minds began to fade, but not before leaving them with one final terrifying image, a wave of darkness spreading across the galaxy, consuming stars and planets alike, leaving nothing but empty void in its wake. "We await your answer." And then silence. For a long moment, the three of them stood in the lab, processing what had just happened. Finally, Captain Vasquez spoke. "Well, that's just great. Galactic war. In 12 months, and we're apparently the cavalry." Dr. Webb was frantically scribbling notes, his hands shaking. The implications are staggering. These beings, they're not just ancient. They're the remnants of an entire galactic civilization. And they chose us. Why us? Sarah looked out the lab window at the night sky, where she could now see the faint glow of the Guardian ships positioned throughout the solar system. Maybe because we're too stupid to know when we're outmatched. Or maybe, Captain Vasquez said with a grim smile, because humans are too stubborn to lie down and die quietly. An alert chimed on Sarah's workstation. Admiral Crawford's voice crackled through the comm system. All senior staff to the command center immediately. We have visitors. The three of them exchanged glances. Through the lab window they could see one of the Guardian ships descending toward Earth, its hull now blazing with lights that formed patterns similar to those they'd found buried in the ice. First contact was about to become much more personal. The Guardian ship landed in the Nevada desert with impossible grace for something the size of a small city. Sarah, Dr. Webb, and Captain Vasquez stood with Admiral Crawford and a dozen other personnel behind a hastily erected perimeter watching, as the vessel settled onto the ancient lakebed with barely a whisper of displaced air. No heat signature, no radiation, no electromagnetic interference, reported Lieutenant Torres from his scanner station. It's like it's not even there. Oh, it's there, Sarah muttered, staring at the geometric patterns that covered the ship's hull. Now that it was close, she could see they weren't just decorative. They pulsed with soft light in complex sequences, almost like, "It's communicating," she said suddenly. "The patterns on the hull, they're not random. It's trying to talk to us." Before anyone could respond, a section of the ship's hull simply faded away, like smoke dispersing in the wind. A ramp of the same dark material materialized, leading from the ground to the ship's interior. "Well," Admiral Crawford said, checking his sidearm. "That's an invitation if I ever saw one." The interior of the ship defied every law of physics, Sarah thought she understood. The corridors were too long for the ship's external dimensions, and gravity seemed to flow in whatever direction was most convenient. They walked on walls, ceilings, and surfaces that shouldn't exist, following their escort deeper into the vessel. Their guide wasn't what any of them had expected. It stood roughly 8 feet tall, but moved with fluid grace, its form shifting between humanoid and something else entirely. Not quite solid, not quite energy, but somehow both at once. When it spoke, the words formed directly in their minds, but its voice carried overtones of sadness that made Sarah's heart ache. "I am called to service. I was once as you are now, flesh and blood and hope. That was before the First War." "How long ago?" Dr. Webb asked, his scientific curiosity overriding his fear. "Your species had not yet learned to make fire. We were young then, proud of our technologies and our expanding reach across the stars. We thought we were the pinnacle of evolution." They entered a vast chamber filled with floating displays showing star maps, tactical readouts, and what could only be weapon schematics. The scale was breathtaking. Battles fought across entire star systems, weapons that could crack planets, shields that could stop supernovas. The Devourers came from the void between galaxies. They are not alive as you understand life, nor dead as you understand death. They are hunger given form, consuming not just matter and energy, but existence itself. Captain Vasquez studied the tactical displays with a professional eye. "How do you fight something like that? You do not fight them. You survive them. The coalition lasted 3,000 years against their advance. World after world, species after species, all consumed. In the end, we had two choices, flee or hide. You chose hide," Sarah said. "We chose both. Some of us fled to the dark spaces beyond the galaxy's edge. Others stayed behind, buried our guardians on worlds where young races might find them, and went into the deep sleep." Admiral Crawford stepped forward. "And now you want us to fight a war you couldn't win?" The being that called itself called to service turned toward them, and for a moment, Sarah could see what it had once been, something almost human, with hopes and dreams and fears just like them. "We want you to have the choice we never had. The Devourers have grown stronger in the 50 million years since our defeat. But so have we. Our guardians carry weapons and technologies beyond what existed in our time. And you are something new. What makes us so special? Captain Vasquez asked. You do not know how to surrender. The displays around them changed, showing images of human history, wars fought against impossible odds, explorers venturing into the unknown, scientists pushing the boundaries of knowledge, even at the cost of their lives. Every species the coalition encountered had a breaking point, a moment when survival became more important than victory. Humans appear to lack this trait. You fight when you should flee. You hope when you should despair. You laugh in the face of death itself. That's not courage, Sarah said quietly. That's stupidity. Perhaps. But it may be the key to victory. Called to service led them to a smaller chamber filled with crystalline structures that hummed with barely contained energy. These are memory cores. They contain the accumulated knowledge of 100 species. Science, technology, philosophy, art. Everything the coalition learned in 3 millennia of war. It is yours, if you will accept it. What's the catch? Admiral Crawford asked. The knowledge will change you, not just individually but as a species. You will become something more than human, but also something less. The choice must be made freely and it cannot be undone. Sarah looked at the memory cores, each one containing the lifetime achievements of entire civilizations. The temptation was overwhelming. Imagine what humanity could accomplish with such knowledge. But she also remembered the being standing before them, once flesh and blood like them, now something else entirely. How long do we have to decide? She asked. The Devourers will arrive in 11 of your months. The knowledge transfer takes 3 months to complete safely. After that, 3 more months to build the weapons and prepare your defenses. Captain. Vasquez did the math quickly. That gives us 5 months to make the most important decision in human history. Yes, choose wisely, children of Earth. The fate of all life in this galaxy hangs in the balance. As they prepared to leave the Guardian ship, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something important. The being who had once been flesh and blood, who had watched entire civilizations fall to the Devourers, seemed almost hopeful. And that scared her more than anything else they'd learned. Chapter 4. The Human Factor 5. Months later, Sarah stood in the command center of humanity's first Guardian-class vessel, watching the final preparations for the defense of Earth. The transformation had been remarkable and terrifying in equal measure. The knowledge transfer had changed everything. Dr. Webb now possessed the accumulated wisdom of xenoarchaeologists from 100 worlds. Captain Vasquez could pilot craft that bent space-time itself. Admiral Crawford commanded a fleet that spanned the solar system, each ship bristling with weapons that could shatter moons. And Sarah herself had become something she barely recognized, part human, part living computer, able to interface directly with Guardian technology and process information at superhuman speeds. They had chosen to accept the knowledge. All of humanity had in the end. When faced with extinction, the choice had been surprisingly easy. But as the long-range sensors detected the first scouts of the Devourer fleet entering the galaxy's edge, Sarah couldn't help but wonder if they'd made the right decision. Fleet status report, Admiral Crawford called out, his voice carrying new harmonics that spoke directly to the Guardian ship's command systems. All vessels ready, Admiral, Captain Vasquez replied from her position at the tactical station. Her enhanced vision could see across vast distances of space, tracking enemy movements in real time. Earth fleet consists of 12 Guardian-class heavy cruisers, 48 human-built hybrid destroyers, and approximately 300 autonomous defense platforms. And the enemy? Sarah's enhanced consciousness reached out across space, touching the quantum sensors they'd deployed at the galaxy's rim. What she found made her artificial heart skip a beat. Admiral, I'm reading. This can't be right. Report, Dr. Chen. The Devourer fleet consists of approximately 50,000 vessels, ranging from scout ships the size of our destroyers to something that registers as roughly the size of Jupiter. Silence filled the command center. Even with all their new knowledge and technology, the numbers were staggering. Well, Dr. Webb said with forced lightness, at least we know why the coalition lost. Sir, Lieutenant Torres called out from his station, I'm receiving a transmission from the outer defense perimeter. The Guardians stationed there are requesting permission to speak with you directly. Admiral Crawford nodded, and the holographic display flickered to life, showing called to service and two other Guardian beings. Their forms seemed more solid now, more real, as if proximity to the approaching battle was giving them substance. Admiral Crawford, the advanced scouts will reach your position in 6 hours. We must discuss strategy. I'm listening. The Devourers fight unlike any enemy you have encountered. They do not seek to destroy your ships or claim your territory. They seek to consume your existence itself. When a vessel is taken by them, it does not merely cease to function, ceases to have ever existed. Captain Vasquez leaned forward. How do you fight an enemy like that? You do not fight them directly. You force them to fight your fight on your terms, using weapons they cannot consume. The display changed, showing a tactical overview of the solar system. Guardian ships were positioned at strategic points throughout, but not in the formation Sarah expected. The Devourers expect us to defend your homeworld directly. Instead, we will use it as bait. Absolutely not, Admiral Crawford said firmly. I won't sacrifice Earth. You will not sacrifice it. You will save it. The Devourers consume technology, energy, matter itself. But there is one thing they cannot consume. Sarah felt a chill as the realization hit her. Life. They can't consume living consciousness. Precisely. The Guardian ships are powerful, but they are machines. The Devourers will consume them eventually. But your hybrid vessels with living crews interfaced directly with the technology present a problem they have never encountered. Dr. Webb was studying the tactical display with his enhanced intellect. You're talking about a fighting retreat. Use Earth as a rallying point, draw them in, then hit them with everything we have while they're concentrated. Yes, but more than that. We have discovered something in your species that the Coalition never possessed. You fight not just with technology, but with something the Devourers cannot understand or consume. What's that? Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew. Hope. Stubbornness. The absolute refusal to accept defeat even when logic demands it. These are not merely emotions. They are quantum forces that affect reality itself at the deepest level. The sensors chimed with incoming contacts. The Devourer scouts had arrived at the edge of the solar system and they were moving fast. All ships, battle stations, Admiral Crawford commanded. Begin Operation Lazarus. As the human fleet moved into position, Sarah felt something she hadn't expected: excitement. Not the artificial enhancement of her augmented nervous system, but genuine human excitement. They were about to fight a war they couldn't win, against an enemy that had destroyed galactic civilizations, with weapons they barely understood, and for the first time in months, she felt truly human again. Incoming transmission from the lead. Devourer vessel, Lieutenant Torres reported. Put it through. The voice that filled the command center was like nothing Sarah had ever heard. Not quite sound, not quite thought, but something that bypassed the ears entirely and spoke directly to the soul. It carried overtones of vast age and bottomless hunger. Guardians, we taste your presence in this place. Surrender the feeding world and your consumption will be swift. Admiral Crawford stood straighter, his enhanced voice carrying the authority of all humanity. This is Admiral James Crawford of the Human Defense Fleet. You are not welcome in this system. Withdraw immediately. Silence. Then something that might have been laughter, if laughter could devour light itself. Humans, the Guardians, have found new servants. How amusing! We will consume you slowly, so that we may savor the novelty. The transmission cut off and the long-range sensors showed the Devourer fleet beginning its approach to Earth. 50,000 ships, moving in formations that hurt to look at directly, bending space around them, like wounds in reality itself. Well, Captain Vasquez said, checking her weapon systems. They seem friendly. Sarah laughed. Actually laughed, surprising herself. You know what? I think we might actually have a chance. Admiral Crawford looked at her with raised eyebrows. Care to explain that optimism, Doctor? They called us servants. They don't understand what we are. Sarah's enhanced consciousness was already calculating firing solutions, coordinating with Guardian AIs, and preparing quantum torpedoes that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. They think we're like the coalition species. Another client race doing the Guardian's bidding, aren't we? Dr. Webb asked. No, Sarah said with growing certainty. We're partners. The Guardians are teaching us, not commanding us. And that's something the Devourers have never faced before. The first enemy scout entered weapons range, and the battle for Earth began. Epilogue. The new dawn 1 year later, Sarah stood on the observation deck of the Defiance, humanity's first fully integrated Guardian human vessel, watching the construction of new coalition station in Earth orbit. The battle had raged for 6 months across the solar system, and humanity had surprised everyone, including themselves. They had won, not completely, not permanently, but decisively enough that the surviving Devourer forces had retreated to the void between galaxies, carrying with them the message that this galaxy was now defended. The cost had been terrible. Mars was gone, consumed entirely along with its Guardian defenders. 3 billion humans had died in the fighting, but Earth survived, and with it, hope for the future. Captain Vasquez joined her at the observation window, her form now more energy than matter, after her sacrifice during the Battle of the Asteroid Belt. She had chosen to merge completely with her ship's systems to stop a Devourer dreadnought from reaching Earth and somehow survive the process. Any word from the deep space surveys? Vasquez asked, her voice carrying harmonics of quantum communication. Dr. Webb's team found 17 more Guardian cache worlds in the Orion Arm alone, Sarah replied, and 3 species that survived the original Devourer invasion by hiding in pocket dimensions. They're ready to rejoin the galaxy. Admiral Crawford's voice crackled over the comm system. All senior staff to the command center. We have visitors. Sarah and Vasquez exchanged glances. In the year since the war ended, they'd grown accustomed to visits from grateful alien species, awakening Guardians, and human colonies being established throughout the solar system. But Crawford's tone suggested this was something different. In the command center they found called to service waiting for them, along with several other Guardian beings Sarah didn't recognize. These looked different, more solid, more present, as if the victory over the Devourers had given them renewed life. Dr. Chen, Captain Vasquez, Admiral Crawford, we bring greetings from the Reformed Coalition. Reformed Coalition? Sarah asked. The species that fled to the dark spaces have begun returning. They have heard of your victory, and they wish to learn from you. Not your technology, that they already possess. They wish to learn your perspective. One of the new Guardians stepped forward, its form shifting between humanoid and something that resembled a crystalline tree. I was once called to wisdom of the Alterian Republic. We fled the galaxy too.
Million years ago, convinced that the Devourers could never be defeated. We have monitored your conflict from afar, and we do not understand how you succeeded where we failed. Captain Vasquez smiled, the expression visible even in her energy.
Form. We cheated. Explain. The Coalition fought the Devourers according to their rules, Admiral Crawford explained. Total war, consuming resources until one side was exhausted. We fought a different kind of war. Dr. Webb pulled up holographic displays showing the battle statistics. We made it personal. Every ship that fell, every world that was threatened, every life that was lost. We remembered. The devourers consume existence, but they can't consume memory, or love, or the sheer, bloody-minded human refusal to go quietly into the night. Sarah nodded, understanding dawning. The devourers are entropy given form. They represent the heat death of the universe, the final ending of all things. But we represent something else. What do you represent? The beginning, Sarah said simply. Every human child born during the war was a statement that the future would exist. Every joke told in the face of annihilation was a declaration that meaning would survive. Every act of kindness between species was proof that cooperation was stronger than consumption. Called to service seemed to shimmer with something that might have been amusement. The devourers called you a paradox, a species that should not exist, fighting a war they could not win, using weapons powered by concepts that had no physical form. And it worked, Admiral Crawford said with satisfaction. Yes, it worked, and now the galaxy stirs with new life. Old species emerge from hiding, new alliances form. The great work begins again. Great work? Sarah asked. The guardian being that had once been called to wisdom gestured toward the observation windows, where stars shone with renewed brilliance. The transformation of the galaxy into something greater than the sum of its parts. The coalition began, this work millennia ago, but was interrupted by the devourers. Now, with humanity as the catalyst, it can continue. Over the following months, Sarah watched as the galaxy transformed. Species that had hidden for millions of years emerged to share their knowledge. Guardian ships awakened throughout the spiral arms, their ancient crews rejoicing at the news of victory. Human colonies spread outward, carrying with them the spark of stubborn hope that had turned the tide of an impossible war. Sarah herself had changed as well. The knowledge transfer had made her more than human, but the war had taught her that being more than human didn't mean being less human. She still loved, still hoped, still laughed at inappropriate moments. Standing on the bridge of the Defiance as it prepared for humanity's first expedition to the Andromeda Galaxy to check on rumors of other devourer fleets, Sarah reflected on how much had changed. A year ago, humanity had been alone in the universe, scraping ice from moons and dreaming of the stars. Now they were partners in a galactic civilization, teachers to species millions of years older than them, and guardians themselves of the hope that had saved them all. Ready for the jump to Andromeda, Dr. Chen? Captain Vasquez asked from her place in the ship's quantum matrix. Sarah smiled, checking the readouts from their guardian-human hybrid crew. Behind them, Earth shone blue and green and beautiful, protected by a fleet of ships that represented the best of both human ingenuity and ancient wisdom. Let's go see what's out there, she said. After all, we're explorers, it's what we do. The Defiance engaged its dimensional drive and disappeared into the space between galaxies, carrying with it the most dangerous thing in the universe, human curiosity, backed by the power to satisfy it. In the depths of space, ancient intelligences took note and began making their own preparations. The galaxy had new guardians now, and they would not be as easy to frighten as the old ones. The age of hiding was over. The age of exploration had begun again, and somewhere in the void between galaxies the surviving devourers felt something they had never experienced before: uncertainty. For the first time in their existence, they were not the hunters. They were the hunted. The end.